about Edge International Lawyers and about myself and co-presenter Gonçalo Figueira. I suppose part of our origin story is in the UK. I think as you will probably detect from my accent that I am indeed a British national, and therefore Gonçalo himself has spent a year at least a year working in our UK office, so very much has a strong connection to the UK as well, and we have a lot of continuing business and existing business in the UK. Edge is a full-service law firm, so we're in a position to assist British nationals or British residents, whether you're already living in the UK, contemplating a move to Portugal, or you've actually moved to Portugal already and you're wondering how Brexit has affected your positioning, both from a tax perspective and also from the perspective of residency, or indeed that you have a holiday home here, or may indeed be contemplating investing in a holiday home or even a business here. So we are very much open to receiving questions. And in fact, we've received some questions later or earlier to this session itself. And so I think that we're really ready to go and look after those British nationals who are looking to make that move. So in terms of the structure of the webinar itself, first of all, we'll maybe just give a little bit of context regarding the pandemic in Portugal and where we are at the moment. Then what we'll look at is basically the NHR program, and specifically, I suppose, the kind of interest of what we have from British nationals at the moment, and that interest and the profile of some of the questions that we're receiving and inquiries that we're receiving. And then we'll move to some of the residency solutions, and then we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So basically, I suppose given that quick overview, I think, Gonçalo, we've got some interesting stats, some improvement in the position regarding COVID overall. We've seen that from even the newspaper headline today in Jornal de Negócios, stating that Portugal is at the same level of other countries which are beginning to exit lockdown. So opening a door perhaps to the easing of restrictions. What do you think? Yes, you just need to unmute.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Yes, we are, I think, finally, after a difficult month and a half, we are finally having again reasons to be optimistic about the evolution of the pandemic in Portugal. As you said, Geoffrey, we are now with the same level of numbers or even below some of the countries that are now exiting from lockdown, such as Germany or even the UK. It's very interesting to note that the R factor of the infection is the lowest in Europe, in Portugal now. So there's been a tremendous collective effort from the Portuguese population, and it has worked out. So what the government is now trying to see is the how and the when of the exiting or easing the lockdown, because I believe pretty much in a parallel to what Boris Johnson has said in the UK, we want it to be the last one, the last lockdown resulting from COVID-19. And we wanted to do it right. So it will most likely be a gradual exiting, with schools starting first, elementary school first, and kindergarten, and then gradually the rest of the economy and of the society following the same path. But in terms of the statistics, in terms of number of infections, in terms of number of deaths, they are all within the patterns of allowing the end of the lockdown. The only number that we are still not there, but we are moving in that direction, is the number of people in hospitals, in particular in intensive care units.
Yes, I think that also it's worth, I think, overall contextualizing the pandemic, and specifically how it's affected Portugal within the context of it being the exception to the rule of Portugal being a healthy place to live.
Absolutely. What we have witnessed, and there's been some dramatic moments in Portugal in January and in the beginning of February, has been what we can call an exception, or within what is the trend of Portuguese health system and the statistics. We have here this map, which shows that Portugal is considered, taking into account not only what is the quality of the hospital system, which is very good, and the number of the expectancy of life, but also other factors which are very important to be regarded as a healthy place to live: the environment, the quality of the food, sunlight hours, and all of that. And that is a trend that came back from years ago, and it will certainly continue now. So we suffered, as other countries have suffered before in Europe, like Italy or and others. It was our turn now. Our health system has managed, even though it was very difficult, has managed to cope. And I believe now the future is looking much brighter ahead of us.
Yeah, and I think in that context, I think maybe even we were a little bit surprised post end of the transition period. From the beginning of the year, the number of inquiries and I suppose quality of the inquiries as well, coming from the UK, from British residents, from British nationals, inquiring about Portugal in a number of different contexts. I mean, why do you think that is?
Well, what was very reassuring to us and to other colleagues and throughout the economy is that the news that was all over the place about Portugal and being in a very difficult situation as a result of COVID through January, that didn't reduce our level of inquiries and of clients or prospective clients wanting to move to Portugal or to invest in Portugal in the near future. And so this confirms a bit what we were saying before. People from the UK and throughout Europe, the rest of the world, they could see that it was a very specific issue and in a certain time frame, and that things would improve and get back to normal. And let's face it, in particular with British clients, there's been many decades of interest in Portugal, and not even wanting to go back centuries ago, but in more recent history and in terms of tourism, investment, and buying a second property or investing in the country. And so what, very interestingly, what Brexit has done was even to increase that interest. I think many British clients didn't want to lose the possibility to enjoy as they used to, so without restrictions. That I think that's the most relevant. Without restrictions, the possibility to travel to Portugal and the rest of the European Union, and to spend as much time as they need or as they want in the country. And so there's been really a substantial increase in relation to last year or 2 years ago. And that's we were very happy with that. That's very reassuring. And there are a number of options which we will be able to see in the next few minutes, precisely to allow all those Brits to do that, which is not to continue to travel, to spend time, and to live their lives without any restrictions.
Yes, I mean, it has been interesting to see the level and the nature of the inquiries. I think, first of all, Brexit crystallization, for want of a better phrase.
Yes.
I think that there's been a clarity as to what Brexit really means in terms of the exercise of residency rights and
it finally happened.
Yeah, finally happened, and the ability to move within within the Schengen area. And I think what that means that we are now having quite a diverse portfolio of inquiries, aren't we, from individuals who are concerned about, are they going to be able to use their holiday home as much as they like, or indeed, can they use Portugal as a gateway, if you like, to Schengen, using one of the residency programs now that British citizens are third country nationals. And also the other element, which I know that you're going to talk about now, which is the non-habitual residency program, and specifically, a question which we are receiving quite consistently is, are we still eligible for the NHR program? But I know you're going to get onto that, Gonçalo, but perhaps we want to give a bit of an overview for everyone first.
Sure. So the probably and fortunately, most of you probably are already somehow familiar with the NHR. I can tell you that was not the case when we first started to talk about. Edge was pioneer in terms of dealing with NHR clients in Portugal. We probably have the largest number of NHR clients in the country, so we've been dealing it since the onset. And initially, it was completely unknown to most of our audience, and because it was something completely new, the name itself, non-habitual resident, wasn't probably the best in order to make people understand what we were talking about. But now, since it's been so successful, word of mouth and our own efforts and of other service providers has made it well known. Still, I think it's always good to get the basics of what it is. Once every while, I still hear, and probably Geoffrey, I'm sure is the same. So can I get the NHR visa? And it's important to contextualize, to explain exactly what is NHR. And let me start by saying it's not a visa. So that's a very good point to start. So non-habitual residence is related to tax. Okay, so there's no doubt about it. Strictly speaking, it's not a residence permit, it's not a visa, but it's interconnected, as we'll see, to being able to live in Portugal. So what the non-habitual residence legislation was launched some years ago by the Portuguese government in order to, it was after the 2011 financial crisis, and basically what our legislators were trying to achieve was to bring new tax residents to Portugal. So, and in particular, high net worth individuals, highly qualified professionals, and also retirees. So the idea was that you would become a Portuguese tax resident and a new Portuguese tax resident. So we get there. NHR is a tax residence legislation. You are a Portuguese tax resident with all the obligations, but if you enroll as NHR after you become tax resident, you have some privileges, some welcome pack, let's call it. Even though it's not automatic, you can become a new tax resident, and if you don't do anything about it, you will not be an HR. So there need to be an action in order to enroll and register as an HR. And there is a deadline to register. So you become a tax resident in, let's say, tomorrow, 24th of February. You have a long time to register as an HR, but you have to do it until the 31st of March of the following year. What we have as a rule with our clients is we register them immediately after they are registered as tax resident. So I believe the cornerstone, the important starting point is really to see what does it imply to be a Portuguese tax resident, because that's what opens the door, literally, to becoming an HR. So the good news is that Portugal has adapted its legislation way ahead of other countries in Europe in terms of adapting the concept of tax residence to the reality of the 21st century. So we had most countries, and they still do, most of the countries, adopt a very rigid concept which has decades of the 183 days consecutively or not in living in a country. And so if you spend that amount of time, most jurisdictions say you are tax resident. Some are stricter, like the UK, but that's another story. But in general, that's the international magic number, 183 or 6 months. So a few years ago, also in a way to maximize the possibility of attracting new tax residents, a bit in line with the NHR, Portugal has changed or made more flexible the possibility to become tax resident. Our legislation hasn't taken out the 183 days. It's still there, and but what just said is that if you don't spend 183 days in a given year, but you treat your Portuguese address as your habitual address, as your main address worldwide, if you don't spend more time in any other jurisdiction that you spend in Portugal, if you treat it as home, then you can still declare yourself as Portuguese tax resident. And that's the expression declare yourself is very important. The Portuguese taxmen, at least in this respect, they take your word for it. So basically, you directly or through your lawyers, you contact the tax office and say, I am now a Portuguese tax resident. They will, the tax authorities will take your word for it. So they will not ask for a day count or because you just declared your main address worldwide. But they do ask for some sort of evidence, of course. And basically, it's not a rocket science because we're talking about simply two documents, which are very easy to understand why they ask. They both relate to the ability to prove that your Portuguese address is your main address and that you can live in Portugal as your main address. So you need to have a proof of that address and that it belongs to you or that you rent it. So a lease contract or a purchase deed for your Portuguese address, and a residency permit, let's call it, or a visa. And that's where this latter one, since Brexit, has become not as, I won't say more complicated, but it has become less automatic than it used to be when the UK was in the European Union. And Geoffrey will develop the residency solutions just in a few minutes.
One thing, Gonçalo, I thought that might be interesting for certainly the British nationals and British residents listening, and even those who are already resident in Portugal, is the fact that sort of concept of tax residency, as you highlighted, is quite different, for example, from the UK.
Yes.
In the sense that there's no sort of active declaration in the same way that there is here in Portugal. And also it's not simply by passage of time that you become a Portuguese tax resident. There has to be an actual declaration in order to do so.
Yes, it involves an active role by whoever wants to become a Portuguese tax resident. Of course, theoretically, if you have lived more than 6 months in Portugal, you are deemed Portuguese tax resident, but the Portuguese tax authorities don't have a radar that can see that you've been here for all that time. So you need to go there and basically declare it. But of course, probably it's a good idea to go back a little bit and because it's the genesis of the process probably starts even a bit before, and the magic 3 letters is NIF, or which is the acronym for tax identification number in Portugal, Portuguese tax number, or número de contribuinte. You can find probably 10 different ways to
we often hear fiscal number, don't we?
Exactly, a tax number, but and so it's very funny because some of our clients are a bit puzzled even before they become tax resident in their first few weeks in Portugal. Why is everyone keep asking me if I want to put my NIF in when I go to a restaurant or in a supermarket? And so the NIF is really it has no intention of being some sort of big brother mechanism, but it's a fundamental a piece of identification for your contractual life, let's call it, apart from your future tax life as well. So when we are approached by a client who either wants to move to Portugal or just to buy a holiday home or to invest or to set up a company or even to be employed, it's always the first step we take, we recommend, is you need to apply for a Portuguese tax number for NIF. And the good news is that we have managed, even through the lockdowns and with the tax offices closed without a previous appointment, we have always managed to obtain those tax numbers.
Takes a little longer.
It takes a little longer, but we are now, I think, what, Geoffrey, within a week time. We used to have it within 1 or 2 days, but it's still possible to obtain it very quickly. And I don't want to bore you with technicalities, but I think it's important to know the steps to take. So when we initially ask for a tax number, it's still what we call a non-resident tax number. So what we need from you is like a copy of your passport and a proof of your address outside Portugal. And with that, we prepare the necessary documents in order to appoint us as your tax representatives and obtain the tax number. It's a 9-digit number, and you can't cancel it, even if you do the mistake of never coming back to Portugal. It will always be there. So what happens is the status of the NIF, of the tax number, can change through your life. You can be initially non-resident, but if Portugal becomes your main address, you become a tax resident. But the number will always be the same. And when you apply for NHR, which lasts for 10 years, it's also a different status. And it will always be, you can check. We have a very, very modern online system, portal, where basically you can interact and see all your tax situation. So that's basically the first step, because you need to insert your tax identification number when you sign your rental contract, when you buy a property, when you open a bank account, when you buy a car, when basically almost every contractual aspect of your life. And it's that number that then, if you decide you want to become a permanent resident, which opens the door to change for tax resident and for NHR.
So the other thing is, I suppose, about the 10-year period. First of all, that's not you're not locked down, if you like, for 10 years. Not that Portugal would be such an unpleasant place to be locked down in for 10 years.
Even though lockdown probably not the best expression right now.
Probably not, no. And but the other thing about it is that it's the phrase that we often hear is that it's a tax holiday. Is it a 10-year tax holiday? Now, that is correct if your income, because it's focused largely on income, is correctly balanced, shall we say, to optimize the NHR program. But it's not a blanket exemption, is it?
Not at all, Geoffrey, and that's a very good point. I believe that one of the reasons why NHR has been so successful is precisely that. It's not, we are not talking about a blanket exemption on income tax, and we're not talking about an offshore scheme. This is a legislation that is in line with European Union rules that other European countries, Union countries, have similar programs, even though probably NHR is the most in the whole most beneficial. But whoever becomes NHR has in the core of its obligations, it's the same as any other tax resident. So you need to do a tax return every year. You need to declare your worldwide income. And in Portugal, the principle is you only declare income. We don't have wealth tax. We don't have the obligation to declare assets. But from the moment you become tax resident, you declare your worldwide income every year between April and June. The only thing is that in your tax return, and we recommend that at least in the initial years, you do it with an accountant that is used to do tax returns for NHR, you must specify that you have the NHR status and have the necessary fill the necessary annexes of the tax return, which are specific for NHRs. And then you will know from the onset that some of your income is under a privileged status as an NHR in comparison to a tax resident which doesn't have an NHR status. So we have the case, without wanting to go into too much detail, we have dividends which basically are not taxed in Portugal if they come from, if they are distributed from outside Portugal, with the exception of dividends originating from jurisdictions in the Portuguese blacklist. Interests from bank accounts is the same principle. Pension, there's been a significant update in the legislation in order to comply with the concerns of other countries. It used to be a full exemption, and now it has been established a very low flat rate for any amount of pension, including lump sums, of 10%.
Yeah.
And that is, it's very interesting because some of our colleagues were a bit concerned that once a flat rate was established, that would mean that there will be less pensioners interested in becoming NHR, and it has not been the case at all. And the reason is precisely because it's a low, if you compare to any other country, and take into account that it can be for any type of amount, it's a very low flat rate, and it has brought the additional stability and security to know that now that there is a rate, and it's not a full exemption, because that was a problem for other countries when we're talking about pension, that brings long-term stability to the legislation. And there was some indefinition sometimes in what could be qualified as pension or not. Some products from other countries, some lump sums. Now, the legislation has not only brought in the 10% for pension, but it has widened the concept of what is considered pension income, and that has brought additional stability and security, which is what people look for. You don't want to be always thinking, will it be this or not? And so I think it has been a very good move of the legislators. And so pension is also a significant part of the income from NHR clients.
But sorry, just to quickly interrupt, and that is just flipping back then to the, because I know there are other questions coming through about specific types of income.
Sure.
But maybe just to flip back to the I suppose, the question at the beginning, which was, and which we're receiving, which is, I'm a British citizen. Am I still entitled to access the NHR program?
That's the logic conclusion of this. There's never been, from the beginning, for reasons of geography and of, I believe, mostly of the high level of taxation of income tax in Europe, the majority of NHR clients were from Europe and from the United Kingdom. But there's never been any obligation or rule that it was only for EU citizens. We have clients who are NHR, and they came from all over the world. So what changed, which is the key question here, for British clients or British applicants to NHR, in the tax side, it hasn't changed anything at all. It remains the same. They have the right to exactly the same that they used to have. The only thing that has changed is in one of the two elements that I mentioned earlier, to become a tax resident, which is the residency permit. So as a EU citizen, you had an address, you could prove that you have a rental contract, a purchase deed. You go to the local town hall, and in the same day, you were issued a nice piece of paper saying you were entitled to live in Portugal permanently. It was called the European Union Registration Certificate. Many of you probably already had it until December 2020. Now, since the 1st of January, the local town halls are not anymore, they can't issue that document to British citizens, because British citizens are no longer European Union citizens. So what we have to do is, I think, Geoffrey, there are two large groups of Brits and that we deal with. The first group is those who were already in, and they already had their European Union registration certificate. So that group, what they have to do is to replace the European Union registration with a specific registration for British citizens who already had the residency rights prior to the 31st of December. And we're having a very large number of clients and new clients, and we are helping with that. The other group is those who come now, after the 1st of January and in the future. And for those, there is another process, and I think we can briefly, probably Jeff, you can go through that.
Yes, absolutely. And I kind of don't want to steal your thunder as well in terms of dealing with some of the other sources of income which are benefit under the NHR program, which can be property income and salaries and consulting income as a high added value activity. That's maybe a little bit beyond the scope of, I suppose, what we're talking about now, because we are managing to cram, I think, quite a lot of information into quite a short period of time.
And we obviously, you will have our contact details. So any specific question, we will be very happy to reply in writing. Just send an email, and we'll be able to get into your specific circumstances, how to deal with how your specific income will be treated as an HR and all of that.
Absolutely. So those contacts will be flipped up at the end on the slide. So just to, I suppose, give a real overview of the residency options and scenarios for British citizens. And I suppose those, as Gonçalo says, can be divided into two categories. British nationals who were resident in Portugal prior to the end of the transition period. And then those British residents, or sorry, I should say British citizens, who are now looking to move to Portugal to establish residency rights in Portugal, or indeed establish access to the Schengen area through one of the residency programs. So in terms of the first category, British citizens who are resident in Portugal prior to the end of last year, basically most of those, a very large proportion of those will already have been issued with an EU residency certificate. And using this certificate, it is possible to register with CEF, which is the Immigration Authority in Portugal, for the purpose of obtaining a 5-year residency card. In between times, those British citizens will be issued with a document. It's not strictly speaking a travel document, but it does prove that that British citizen is legally resident in Portugal, and it's temporary in the sense that eventually it will be replaced by this 5-year residency card. Now, we have not been, there've been a couple of questions actually. There's one question which came in prior to this session, expressing some concerns about the fact that here we are at the end of February, the registration has already been done on the CEF site, and they still have not, the individual concerned has still not received notification of an appointment, because everyone will be, those who have registered will be notified at the email address which they used for the purpose of obtaining the new document. Don't be concerned. Gonçalo, I don't think we've got a case yet of any British citizen who's actually got their appointment.
No, not yet.
And I think given the current climate as well, whereby there's a limitation on CEF appointments anyway, and in the current lockdown, I think there's going to be an inevitable delay here.
Yes, CEF is going through some type of restructuring as well, in order to improve its the way it works, and it's also under lockdown. So obviously the normal way that the speed of how things used to be is not yet in motion. But what we know is that they are working behind closed doors in a specific software, and to have basically everything in place for when there is no lockdown in place, they can start to book appointments, which basically is just a confirmation of what you already have, because you're right, and I think that's probably what the reassurance that most of you would like. Your rights are already protected with the registration. This appointment is just basically for you to have a nice card, which is much easier to carry around than a piece of paper, and where you are, as it's normal with this type of documents, you have your photos, your fingerprints, what we call the biometric data taken. But the important thing is really to make the registration, and there is a deadline, right, Geoffrey?
Yeah, that's right, the 30th of June in order to do that. There is another mechanism if you haven't been in actually the small category of people, British citizens who are unable to obtain the EU residency certificate before the end of the year. CEF have indicated if that British citizen can prove that they were resident in Portugal, either by way of transactions through a Portuguese bank account, even shopping receipts, a rental contract, for example, having purchased a property as a primary residence, even registering as a tax resident. This would all help to create a body of work to show that residency was established before the end of the year, residency which should be protected under the withdrawal agreement.
Yes.
What's also been interesting is the indication we have is that there will be specific, if you like, booths which are opened up, not just in the CEF offices, but actually in the local town halls, in order to facilitate the exchange of these documents. It's really to take the biometric data for the purpose of producing the 5-year residency card. So I think that that's very much a work in progress. We do very much encourage, obviously, British citizens who have EU residency certificates to register if you need any further information on that. We're assisting a number of British citizens with the whole process right through to the obtaining of the residency card. I think that given also the time available, I will very briefly umbrella some of the other residency options available for British citizens. British citizens are now eligible to apply for the Golden Visa. And I suppose the benefits of the Golden
Just in order to, sorry, Jeff, just in order to be, again, very clear, because we had clients who already had their European Union document. This is strictly for new clients who are coming to Portugal now and who have not previously obtained European Union registration. So these are the options for those who are starting fresh.
Exactly. This is an alternative for, I suppose, the only alternative, in fact, for those looking to establish residency rights, the Golden Visa, together with the other visa programs which are available to our other third country nationals who wish to reside in Portugal. So the Golden Visa, I will just focus very briefly on one of the Golden Visa options, which is the property investment of 500,000 euros, which is property by way of making this investment by way of purchase of property. Although there are other options available, such as an investment option, or indeed creating employment and setting up a company. But for now, the most popular option by far is the property option, and our Golden Visa department is very strong in this, and probably one of the leading, if not the leading, law firm in Portugal dealing with the Golden Visa. I should caveat this by saying that this webinar is not going to focus largely on this. It deserves a webinar alone, a standalone webinar, dealing with these options. But the long and the short of it is, and very briefly regarding the Golden Visa, it will give British citizens the right to movement within the Schengen area itself. The visas are issued in periods of 2 years. There are minimum stay periods of 14 days over any 2-year period. So that is attractive, one has to say, for the purpose of not necessarily establishing tax residency in Portugal and increasing optionality should, for example, you wish to purchase a holiday home in Portugal and be able to freely travel to and from to it from the UK without being restricted by way of the tourist visa, which is the type of visa which British citizens who haven't residency rights in Portugal will enter Portugal with a validity of 90 days. And then that has to be 90 days generally within any 180-day period. So there are a lot of restrictions working on a pure tourist visa. And certainly that may be of interest to increase optionality. And then giving a right to a Portuguese passport or to apply for a Portuguese passport after 5 years. There's been quite a lot of conversation regarding the visa and the changes which were mooted and have been mooted for some time. And the good news about those changes is that they're not due to come into force until the 1st of January of next year. And therefore, the existing rules will operate in relation to those property investments. The main restriction being that the property investment will now be focused on interior areas, what are defined as interior interior areas in Portugal, which necessarily really cuts out Lisbon and Porto and certainly parts of the Algarve. However, should you want further information on that, please do contact us and wait to hear from us regarding a webinar which is devoted to the subject. Then I think that subsequently the other options available are a D7 visa, which is largely a visa regarding an investment. It's different from the golden visa investment in the sense that it's necessary to prove that in fact that there have been 12,000 deposited in a bank account in Portugal, and there may well be some other requirements. Now, for those of you who are looking at your screen, you may well have seen a slide which is posted up with Gonçalo's and my details. This may well be due to the fact that we're coming to that time. I think we're the 1 hour which we had devoted for this webinar will elapse. But what I'm going to continue to do is, because we still have quite a little bit of ground to cover, particularly in relation to questions which have already been raised. I'm just going to go briefly through the rest of the requirements for the D7 visa, because once the visa has been issued in the UK it's effectively through the Portuguese embassy consulate, but they use a third-party agency in order to assist. It's issued for 120 days, and then the process is completed, in fact, in Portugal. Common elements for both the D7 and the golden visa are showing that you have a clean criminal record. And one of the other elements, I suppose, or one of the other options which are available to British citizens who are married to EU nationals is a reunification of the family visa, which is effectively showing that you are either married to or dependent child of a EU citizen. And this will entitle the spouse to a 5-year residency permit. Really, that's very much glossing over each one of those, but I just wanted to give you an idea of the options which are available. There's also another startup visa called the D2 visa, which is very similar to the D7 visa, but it also requires to show a relevant investment in Portugal. More information, please do address either myself or Gonçalo on those email addresses, and we will certainly direct you to the specialists within the office who can assist. But I think we've maybe got time to focus on a couple of questions, Gonçalo, which have come through. Maybe you want to take the first of those, which is in relation to the tax resident in Malaysia. So the question was, I'm currently tax resident in Malaysia. I seem to be back, so hello everyone again. And I'm currently tax resident in Malaysia, but likely to move back to the UK later this year, after which we are very interested in living in Portugal. Well, I think we probably covered quite a lot of material there, yes, Gonçalo, for that question.
Yes.
I don't know whether there's any additional comment you'd like to make.
No, well, we can probably just do a quick wrap up. First, glad to hear that you are interested to another example of someone who's interested to move to Portugal, and that's the process where, as a British citizen, you have a number of options regarding residency now. So there is basically, I think we can divide into two groups or two types of visas. One is an investment visa, which is the case of what we normally call the golden visa, and the other is basically the D7s, which is where you want to live permanently in Portugal, and you show that you have enough means to support yourself, that you have a clean criminal record, and basically we are able at Edge to guide you through the entire process and assist with the entire process of obtaining this residency permit. Then with that, you are allowed to live in Portugal permanently, and you can enroll, as we've discussed, as a tax resident and as an NHR.
There are some other, not restrictions, but additional requirements under the D7 visa, aren't there, Gonçalo, regarding the number of days that you actually spend in Portugal. So it really is geared towards individuals who wish to live here, and really geared towards individuals who wish to register as tax residents as a rule. Then we have another question, which is, we are now retired and we're going to buy a villa in the Algarve, Portugal, but we can only visit the EU for 90 days in 180. It may not be practical. It will be practical if you actually apply for the golden visa. Therefore, if you fall within, you're making your purchase and you fall within the minimum value requirements for the golden visa, yes, there are other bans other than the 500,000, which is a little bit beyond the scope of this particular webinar. But do get in touch with us, and we can explain those to you. And we can also make sure that the process that you embark on in the purchase is going to ensure that it's a compliant and qualified investment for the purposes of the golden visa. Now, why would you do this? You would do this because this will give you free access to Schengen, as long as you have the visa itself, and then you can freely use your property in the Algarve, which is obviously going to be a major benefit. Then we have a question which I'm going to flip to the end of, of the question itself, which is, I'm planning to visit this year and visit Portugal and obtain the required NIF and start setting up myself for the future retirement to Portugal from the UK. Do you think, provided I can manage to get to Portugal, I will be able to set up the NIF and obtain the required documents at the required tax office? Do you think the housing market will change dramatically due to COVID and entry requirements for future retirees wishing to live longer term in Portugal?
Well, the good news is you don't even need to be in Portugal, as we explained, to apply for your NIF. We can assist with obtaining your NIF even if you are still outside Portugal. So that's not a problem at all. And yes, the NHR now, even for retirement income or pension income, is for the long term, and that there is no foreseeable alteration to the legislation, and there is no restriction in terms of British citizens. So yes, regarding the housing market, it's not something we as lawyers can advise. Of course, we can put you in touch with reputed professionals, but it's common knowledge, and it's good news that in spite of COVID, the market is quite stable, and so are the prices.
Okay, so then those were some of the questions we received beforehand. We've got a series of questions coming through, which you posted during the webinar. So one of these is, can I apply for NHR if I'm employed by a UK company, paid in the UK, but just work and live in Lisbon remotely. Now, this is it's an interesting one, Gonçalo, isn't it?
Yes, and it's very common actually. We have a large number of NHR clients in a similar position. So to put it very simply, yes, the generic reply is yes, you can. Then there are a number of buts and ifs, but then we can go into more detail in a direct communication in the future.
Yes, yes, because we need to just obtain a little bit more information from you in relation to the way that you're paid and will be paid subsequent, and where you will pay tax after you actually exit tax residency in the UK. So I think we have another question here. Is the processing of NHR and Golden Visa still on track for British nationals post-Brexit? And can you still process the application without being actually in Portugal due to travel restrictions? As regards the NHR, yes. Really, we can do most, if not all, of the process remotely. The issue is obtaining the Golden Visa or any other type of residency visa and obtaining the appointment at CEF. But as you alluded to, Gonçalo, there are solutions being explored in relation to that within the current lockdown scenario.
Exactly.
So are they on track? Yes, they are. Therefore, I think that what's happening is that the Portuguese authorities are adapting to the realities as well. So there's a question here about, am I right in thinking that those already within 100% exemption under NHR still retain it?
Of course, you. One of the sacred principles of Portuguese tax law and constitutional law is that you cannot retroactively take away a right that you had before. So if you already are in an NHR, the position doesn't change for the remainder of your 10 years. A very good example of that, actually, and we've tested it in practice, and our clients could see that what we have told them before was exactly the case, was regarding clients with pension income that were enrolled as an HR before this alteration of the taxation of pension income from full exemption to 10%. Those were already NHR up until the date that the law changed, continue to be fully exempt. The new NHRs after that date with pension income, they pay 10%. The other exemptions, which are still 100% exempt, such as dividends and interests, they continue.
Yes, the position is the same.
Yes.
I think now final question, which is, as the NHR scheme has now been active for more than 10 years, the first people registered for the programme will have completed their 10 years by now. What has happened to these people with respect to Portuguese taxation going forward? Well, normal Portuguese tax.
It's so good to have that question, because I was missing it. It's a classic question since the very first time we started doing conferences about NHR. So it can only mean that it's a good question. We now have, because until a few months ago or 1 year ago, we could only say what we expected legally to be the position, but we now have indeed cases of people who have completed their 10 years. And the reality is, once again, and we are very happy with that, exactly what we were telling our clients since the beginning. This is, even though 10 years is a long time, it's still an exceptional situation. So it's a privileged situation that you benefit from. But one of the reasons it's widely accepted and well regarded internationally is precisely because it's not for life. So it's a temporary exception of your tax residency rules, of your income tax rules. So once when you are registered as NHR, the tax authorities issue a document saying starting date and end date, which basically is a full year. They don't say the day and months. Once that year expired, the 10th year, you don't have to do anything. The record automatically goes back to tax resident without NHR, and so you continue to do if you continue to live in Portugal, continue to do your yearly tax returns, but you obviously don't have the same exemptions or reduced rates or flat rates that you had as NHR. So what is a good idea is to take to plan ahead the 10 years to do as much as possible of the tax savings within that period. If you have possibility to do lump sums, receive dividends beforehand, and also to plan ahead after, because even apart from the NHR status, it is possible to structure and to plan ahead your income to have the most favorable treatment possible. There are products such as life insurance and all of that that can still offer a very interesting savings. One point that I always like to remind as well, even though that's not part of NHR, NHR relates only to income tax, but all tax residents and even everyone who have assets in Portugal, even without being tax residents, they have a almost unique in Europe treatment in terms of succession tax and gift tax. All your assets in Portugal, properties, cars, cash in the bank, shares in a Portuguese bank, they are fully exempt of succession and gift tax as long as they are the beneficiaries are your direct family, spouses, children, grandchildren, and that's every for it has no relation with the 10 years, so it will always be there.
Yes, and with the territoriality exemption as well, applying only to assets within Portugal itself.
Exactly.
It's a very favourable treatment for gifts and inheritances. Okay, so we have overrun a little bit, so I think it's really time to wrap up. There have been a couple of questions about whether this video will be available after the session. Yes, it will. It will be posted up on YouTube. But also, if you do want to see the video itself, do contact us, and we can send you the coordinates for that. The other thing to say is those are our contact details. You see my name, Gonçalo's name, together with our email address. Two websites there. One which is a website which is focused on the non-habitual residency program itself. The other which is our general website as well. Should you want to browse certain further information on the non-habitual resident site, there are a number of articles and which may prove to be interesting for you. Just want to thank you all for your attendance.
Yes,
It's been a really good turnout. and a really good retention in terms of people staying live, staying interested. What I will also repeat is there will be a further webinars which we will undertake, and really one of those will focus on the residency solutions which are available for British citizens, those British citizens really who are looking to establish residency rights now in Portugal now and moving forward. Yes, we covered it lightly in terms of looking at the golden visa, the D7, the D2 visa, reunification of the family visas, but it was no more than to whet the appetite for the next webinar, where we'll look at those a little bit more closely. So thanks again for your attention, everyone. It's been a really good response and good questions. And as I say, should you have any questions which you feel we haven't addressed during the webinar, drop myself or Gonçalo an email, and we'll get back to you, or indeed even drop a line to the email which you were notified of this webinar, and we will ensure that we or one of our team, we have quite a large NHR team, will be able to get back to you as quickly as possible. Thanks again, and I wish you a very good day and a very good week. And
thank you very much.
And very much health and exit from lockdowns moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.